What's up? How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame. This is Rochester First, the channel that you are watching. Although all the kids, the cool ones, the ones you wanted to hang out with when you were in high school, they all call it Rock One. It is Thursday, October the 23rd. Bill's getting ready to take on the Panthers. We will talk a whole lot about them, the defensive reinforcements that are arriving this week, that may be arriving sometime in the near future, what this offense should be. Did a deep dive on that. We'll get into that a little bit today. And a little gambling scandal in the NBA today. We'll talk about the impact of what it means for, I think, most of the people out there who are into the online gambling thing. I'm included in that group. Also, what it means for the NBA going forward. So a lot to get to on the show today. We are still blue and white behind me for the Toronto Blue Jays, and Rochester native Ernie Clement. World Series Game 1 starts tomorrow. Dodgers are a favorite. Let me see what kind of favorite they are. I'm guessing the Dodgers are around like a minus 180 favorite. Not quite 2-1, but almost 2-1. Look, they've been the best team in baseball since like mid-September. It felt like they kind of took the regular season off and just decided to show up for the playoffs. And boy, have they been good in the postseason. Their starting rotation, which isn't even the strength of the team, is the thing that's been dominating everybody. Dodgers are more than 2-1 favorite, so minus 225 to bet on the Dodgers to win the World Series. Not inappropriate. I thought it'd be a little lower, but look, the Jays have the lineup to 100% push this Dodgers pitching staff, and I'd be surprised if the Dodgers rolled through Toronto like they rolled through Milwaukee. And Milwaukee and Toronto probably, similar level of teams. I think Toronto's got way more resources, way more big name hitters, and they're hotter. I mean, the Blue Jays are just ridiculous in terms of what they did to the Yankees, and then the duration of that 7-game Mariners series. Obviously didn't win every game, but there are guys, Jimenez at the bottom of the order, Clement's been amazing as a 6-7 hitter. So Toronto's got a number of guys who are just hitting the absolute cover of the ball, and they will, I think, push the Dodgers. Now, I'd probably guess LA in 6 would probably be, that's the I respect the other team, but I'm not quite sure they can win the series prediction. That's your typical 6-gamer. Like, I don't think they'll go 7, but they'll fight a little bit. I wouldn't be stunned, though, if Toronto won the series. I would not be, as hot as that lineup is. So, like I said, Game 1 of that is tomorrow on Friday. But right now we're going to get into the Bills. And one of the big questions coming out of that Falcons game, in terms of what was discussed in the postgame, was why the bleep didn't the Bills use James Cook more in the fourth quarter? And my contention with this team has been all year that when they run the ball, that's how this offense moves the best. That you can't just rely on Josh Allen to carry you for 60 minutes, 17 weeks out of the year. You need that run game to be not only functional, but this is like the engine of the offense. Josh Allen might be the driver, but the run game is the engine. And a lot of it is James Cook and what he's done, what he's ascended into, one of the top running backs in the NFL. But it's also the offensive line, too. This offensive line is just fantastic. Top 2 or 3 in the league. So it's a combination effort there of being able to have holes, being able to have space. There's some scheme there, too. Give Joe Brady some credit. But the run game as a whole, to me, is what this Bills team needs to really be that 30-point-a-week type offense that is expected, that Brandon Beane talks smack about on the radio, earlier or late in the offseason. And when they don't run the ball well, my contention has been that's when the offense bogs down. That, Josh Allen can, don the cape and save them every once in a while, more than once in a while, but not every time. And you need James Cook to be the guy. And when the Bills got into we're down 7, we need a drive situation in Atlanta on Monday night, they passed it 3 times and got 0 yards. So my thought coming out of that has been not only is the run game the engine, but you might really need to lean into that more. You might even need to treat Josh Allen not like the MVP, not like the guy that can just carry you to wins every single week. You might have to treat him more like a rookie quarterback, to where you want the ball out of his hands. You want to give the ball to the running back. You want to use more play action. Not because Josh Allen is deficient in any way. He is not. This is not a Josh Allen conversation. The conversation about taking the ball out of Josh Allen's hands is about the guys he's throwing to, not Josh Allen. And it's about, to a degree, how good that running game is. That no matter what kind of quarterback you have, when your running game, when your offensive line is top 2 or 3, when your running back is close to top 5, you want to give that guy and that group the ball more often. So with the bye week, I spent some time today kind of going through the stats to see how reasonable a hypothesis that would be to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands more. And what I found is that the Bills actually are doing a pretty good job in terms of when they use James Cook, how often they use him, and that you really probably don't want to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands any more than you already are. The Bills are a good run team. They're one of the top run teams in the NFL. And when it comes to success rate, they're top 3 in the league on first down running the ball. So success rate is generally a measure of, on first down, can you get 40% of the yardage you need? And since it's usually 1st and 10, we're talking about getting 4 yards on a play. So the Bills, when they run the ball, they get 4 yards about half the time. And they're, like I said, top 3 in the NFL with that. So they're one of the more ridiculously good, ridiculously successful teams on first down running the ball. Throwing the ball, they're actually a little bit more successful, 48% or so, as opposed to 47% for the run plays. But that ranks 18th. So what we're learning here is that, in general, in the NFL, it's more successful to throw the ball. Also, if you want to go by EPA, which is essentially really, really generally summed up, is a measure of how effective every play is. Pass plays are like 3 or 4 times more effective than run plays in general. For the Bills, their EPA per play throwing the ball is like 5 times better than running the ball on most downs, in most situations. So in general, around the league and for the Bills, passing the ball is much more efficient. And even if you just want to measure success rate, how often do you get 4 yards on first down with a pass play? The Bills are a little better throwing the ball. But league-wide, their passing success rate only ranks 18th. So while the whole league is better throwing the ball in general and on first down, the Bills' split in terms of success is a little closer. They're a much better running team on first down than most teams are, even if they're a better passing team in general than they are a running team by a smidge on first down. The other interesting stat, not really relative to the point here, but a thing I found interesting is that when the Bills have an unsuccessful first down play, so that means they're in 2nd and 7 or longer, they're actually top 1 or 2 in still getting a first down anyway. So what that tells you is, even if it doesn't work out on first down, most likely because you have Josh Allen, the Bills are able to find a way to get a first down on that series anyway. So I think what I want to conclude from that is, do you want to use James Cook on first down more? Because again, going back to that Atlanta possession in the fourth quarter, the Bills are down 7 and they threw it 3 times. And I criticized that. I said, you've got James Cook. He's got 87 yards on 17 carries, whatever it was, averaging 5 yards a pop. He's been good. Why? And most people had this question. Why do you bench him totally for that spot when you need 7 and he's been effective? Well, the numbers say that on first down, the Bills have about the same chance of being successful throwing the ball as they do running it. And that includes Josh Allen scrambles and all the other non-James Cook run plays you could possibly dream up. And in general, they're way more efficient passing the ball. So while it may have felt wrong, and while it didn't work out certainly because the Bills tried 3 passes and got 0 yards in that spot, they punted, Falcons get a field goal and the game was over. The numbers say in general, the Bills are just fine putting the ball in Josh Allen's hands over James Cook. And while league-wide, when you compare the Bills to the other teams, they might be better off running than most other teams, they're still more likely to get 4 yards, more likely to get a big play, more likely to score points on a drive where Josh Allen has the ball. And that's all situations, all quarters. So if you want to consider, if you want to think that James Cook is not, doing enough when it comes to, or not being allowed to do enough when it comes to contributing to this offense, that's probably the incorrect take. Not only are the Bills right in general to give Josh Allen the ball in most situations, they still do give James Cook and the run game plenty of opportunities. First down plays this year, 105 times they've run the ball, 66 they've passed it. Now, I didn't compare to what other teams do, what those percentages mean league-wide, but that sounds pretty logical to me. About 2/3 of the time, you're running the ball, and 1/3 of the time you're passing it. A little less than that, be about 62%, somewhere in there. When you have this run game and then you still have Josh Allen to throw it, I think 105 to 66 sounds like a pretty good comparison. A pretty good ratio, I think is the better word to say. So it doesn't mean the Bills are doing the wrong thing. The numbers say that they're really operating this offense how you probably would want them to. Now, the one number that I found, if you're still at home thinking, well, I don't care what you say, Thad. I saw James Cook be successful, and then they benched him when it was 3rd and 1 and fourth quarter. They got to use James Cook more. When those games matter, they got to use James Cook more. Well, in the fourth quarter, you do have a point because James Cook only has 21 touches this year in the fourth quarter. By far his lowest quarter. 37, and I think 41 in the fourth quarter, 37 in the first, and 20-something in the second quarter, which you can kind of understand because you've got the end-of-half situation that Cook normally doesn't participate in. So there is probably a little bit of an argument that Cook could be used more when it comes to, the fourth quarter. But again, I think in general, for all the thoughts about do the Bills use Cook enough or are they using him appropriately, every number I looked at today says they probably do. That he's a big part of the offense, that he is darn near as successful as Josh Allen is, but simply by the nature of what he does versus what Josh Allen does, a successful run play, even if the success rate number is a measure of 4 yards on first down, a successful run play is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 8. But a successful pass play, that can easily be 30. It can be a touchdown from anywhere on the field. And James Cook's a great home run hitter when it comes to running the ball, but he's still less likely to get 20 than Josh Allen is throwing the ball through the air. So no matter how good that run game gets, how efficient James Cook gets, even with the receiving group the Bills have, which is certainly below average to put it generously, the Bills are going to be better off putting the ball in Josh Allen's hands most of the time. Now, does that mean they're perfect? No, because I think that the biggest criticism you can make about this offense right now is that situationally, they have not been great. Obviously, the third down end around to Elijah Moore, when you have James Cook as an option, is a bad call in that instance. Running the play against the Saints where the little flip to Khalil Shakir didn't work. Certainly you can quibble with that one. So there are individual situations, plays, snaps, calls that you can argue with, that you can criticize and say that's not what you should do when you have 17-4. I think looking at these numbers and how good the Bills are, certainly, with Josh Allen, but also with the run game, in every big spot this year, for the duration of the season, every 3rd and 1, every 3rd and gotta have it, the ball should be in either 17 or 4's hands. And on some plays, both. You can make an argument for Ty Johnson. I'm fine with that on an occasional 3rd and 3 draw. If you want to even say that maybe Ray Davis on a 3rd and a half yard and you really want a guy who's got some physical ability, maybe. But I think for the most part, for the rest of the year, when it comes to when the Bills need a play, when they got to get a bucket, it's either Josh Allen or James Cook, and that's it. Don't mess around with the other stuff. And I think that would be the best plan going forward. When it comes to fixing some other issues on this offense, look, the Bills could go out and trade for, Chris Olave or some other high-level receiver that would certainly improve the pass-catching group. The other priority, I think, is just cleaning up the mistakes. If you eliminate the turnovers and the penalties, then whatever issues you might have with whether it's James Cook getting the ball in the fourth quarter or how much the Bills pass it or any sort of scheme or play-calling philosophy, the last couple of weeks, you take out the turnovers and the penalties, or at least reduce the penalties, and this offense will function more similar to what it did last year. So, going through the numbers, it's not about using Cook more. It's not about even using the run game more. It's about, I think, running the ball better, because although the Bills ran it pretty well against the Falcons, they did not run it well against Baltimore or against New England. And I think those were primary reasons, primary issues that caused the offense to have a problem. So if you can run the ball better, that's part one. But part two is just then clean up the dumb stuff. You know, this team last year only put the ball on the ground fumbling-wise 9 times all season. They've already got 8 right now. And not that you should expect the team to always lead the NFL in fumbles like they did last year with only 9. You know, those things are going to, you know, kind of vary from year to year. But it is a problem this season. You know, 8 through 6 games puts the Bills on pace for, you know, over 20. And that would, you'd go from the most careful with the ball team last year with 9 fumbles to one of the worst this year if you had 20 plus. So that is a part of the problem, more so than whether or not James Cook gets the ball in one particular spot. The other thing that obviously could help the Bills would be better defense. That'd be nice. And they are going to get some help. Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt are back from suspension, ready to go. Talked to both guys yesterday. I know that I'm putting on the screen here, it's the D-line cavalry. Neither guy wanted to paint themselves in that way. They're not the heroes. They're not going to change everything. They're just kind of here to do their job. You know, actually, Michael Hoyt put it pretty well. He's like, look, as a defensive player, if you come in trying to do something different or get out of your comfort zone, that's when bad things are going to happen. So they want to come in and just, you know, do their, you heard the 111th cliche way too many times in the conversations with both guys, more so with Hoyt than Ogunjobi. But either way, the point has been made. This is not, it's not like the Bills are bringing in, you know, Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White to help the defense here. These are 2 solid guys, but they shouldn't be game changers. Now, how much help can they be? It's a different question. You know, there's a good chance that these 2 guys can have an impact. And I'll start with Ogunjobi quick here. Look, I don't think he's much more than a solid rotational piece. You know, watching him on film with Pittsburgh the last few years, there's not anything that's overly impressive. The guy certainly belongs in the NFL and can play and can help. And there is an argument that he was more productive with the Bengals 3 or 4 years ago in a 4-3 defense than the Steelers' 3-4 defense. So the Bills play a 4-3, so the scheme for Ogunjobi might be better, might be more conducive to what he wants to do. At the very least, with Ogunjobi on the field, it's going to make the Bills' defensive tackle rotation a little more logical, because last week they only played with 3 defensive tackles, which is ridiculous for a team that rotates their D linemen as much as Buffalo does. It was Ed Oliver, Deion Walker playing game 6 of his career, and Jordan Phillips, an experienced veteran, but a guy who they called up from the practice squad. So they were not in good shape, the Bills, last weekend at defensive tackle. Ogunjobi at least just puts another functional, responsible, professional body on the field. I still think the Bills will probably call somebody up from the practice squad. I didn't review who has practice call-ups left. It might be Fedarian Mathis again. Phillips might have one more, I'm not sure. Either way, though, I don't think they want to go, especially in this game, where you're facing a Panthers team who wants to run the ball more than anything else. I think the Bills will probably want to have a full stable of 4 defensive tackles for this game. So I think you'll see Oliver and Deion Walker. Ogunjobi will be the backup at the 3 technique for Oliver. And then you could put Mathis or Phillips. I think Zion Logue can't come up again. I think he's out of call-ups right now. I think you'll put one of those 2 guys in at the other, you know, the more the nose tackle technique. And although I don't think Ogunjobi is going to be a game changer, just the fact the Bills can have a normal defensive tackle rotation will make a difference. Now, Ogunjobi is a stronger pass rusher than he is a run defender. So I think what will help too, in that game against Atlanta, when the Bills didn't have their best pass rushing group out, when it wasn't, I think it was Bosa, Oliver, Rousseau, and maybe Javon Solomon, it might not have mattered who that other defensive tackle spot was. When it wasn't that top group, you got an obvious drop down to the B group. There just was not any juice for the other front 4 when they tried to rush the passer. Ogunjobi could help there. So if you're looking for some way he can contribute, I think that's the spot number 1. Of the 2 guys, though, the one I'm more excited for is Michael Hoyt, for a number of reasons. Number 1, Hoyt was a guy who was branded as Mr. Versatility. He can do so many things. There's video of him out there more or less covering DK Metcalf. We talked to him about it later. He's like, look, I was in a zone coverage. I was kind of just, you know, pushing him towards other people who are more equipped to handle that guy. But regardless, the Rams used him in that type of role. So he can do a number of things other than being an edge rusher and rushing the quarterback. So seeing how the Bills employ him, how they deploy him, will be fun to watch this weekend. The other thing with Hoyt, and the thing that I think is more impactful to the Bills, is that he's a better run defender than he is a pass rusher. So now you can put him on the field with Greg Rousseau, and the Bills arguably might have a top 5 edge defending combo when it comes to setting the edge going against the run. Joey Bosa has been good this year in general, but he has not been that effective against the run. And there's been multiple times where he has looked just out of place and unable to keep up with, zone runs or zone read runs where the quarterback can fake and keep, stuff going around the edge. He just has not looked like a guy that has the athleticism anymore to deal with Alvin Kamara trying to get the edge. And again, with Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, these aren't speedsters, but they're solid, above average professional running backs. And Bosa's not bad, but he's definitely not choice number 1 for defending the run. I think Hoyt will be an improvement there. I think you can play Hoyt on first and second down. And even if the Panthers want to go play action, if they do want to throw on an early down, Hoyt will not be out of position or out of a comfort zone, but he's a higher floor defender on early downs. And then the other part of that is you'll take Joey Bosa and you can use him more on the pass rushing downs where he has been really good. I know the sacks haven't been there, but if you look at every single underlying metric, pass rush, win rate, pressure percentage, hurries, everything other than sacks says that Joey Bosa is having a damn good year when it comes to rushing the passer. Now, me just watching the film, the eye test tells me that I don't think he's been quite as good as those underlying metrics will say, but he's been good. And when you can take whatever gas he has left and focus it on those downs, that to me sounds like a pretty good plan for the Bills. So of the two guys, although Ogunjobi will kind of settle things at defensive tackle, Hoyt is the one that could have the biggest impact, maybe by allowing Joey Bosa to have a bigger impact. So that's the fascinating part of those two guys for me this weekend. It's more Hoyt. And obviously how, the Bills love their versatility guys. Give me somebody that I can use 3 or 4 different ways. And Sean McDermott will be very happy. Hoyt can be that guy. But I think the more important or the more, impactful part of Hoyt coming back is what Joey Bosa might be able to do. The other guy who was back for the Bills at practice on Wednesday, actually at practice on Monday, but media weren't allowed to go to practice on Monday. That'd be Max Hairston, the first rounder. He is got his practice window open and was on the field yesterday too. Looked good. Let me tell you, you watch Max Hairston for about 5 minutes and you're like, wow, yeah, he's still fast. That's right. Yeah, I remember him being fast. Oh, yeah, he's fast. Yeah. So even with a brace on his leg, and you can't quite see it in the video there, but there was certainly a brace on the injured left leg, or right leg, I'm sorry. He still looked darn quick on the field. Now, it's just individual drills we're watching. We're not really seeing anything he's doing in terms of team stuff. He was limited. He might not have even done any team stuff. Talking to him afterward, he kind of seemed to indicate that his activity might be limited to individual drills right now. But at least Max is out there making progress, and that's the positive part. And like I said, looking pretty good, for a guy, even a guy that hasn't really been at football for a while. And the Bills have talked about how one of the things with Max Hairston is they got to kind of watch him play football again. Have him go out there and do all the normal stuff you do, go through the drills, figure out where he's at, before he can get back on the field. One thing Hairston said yesterday was, and I was a little surprised by this, his reaction to the injury was primarily, I'm glad it wasn't something worse. And I kind of like that reaction for a young guy, because they may not, Max Hairston as a rookie may not understand, how far behind he's gotten right now. He might just think, I've played football, I'm going to keep playing football. But regardless, you can get, I can see you being pretty emotional, pretty stressed out that your first year, when you're a first round pick and there are a lot of eyes on you, both inside and outside of the organization, when you get hurt, especially for a guy who the number one question people had about him was, is he big enough to play in the NFL? So right off the bat, when you get hurt in training camp and you're trying to not necessarily shake, but avoid that injury-prone designation, you can see some stress. You can see some pressure, some worry. And for Hairston to take the proper perspective of, at least I didn't need surgery. At least it wasn't something worse. I was kind of impressed by that. Now, he's got a brace on, like I said, and he said yesterday he doesn't want to have to play with it, but he says he's used to it, doesn't even think about it anymore, which I don't know how much I buy, especially when you're a speed guy. You know, you've seen NFL players. I mean, even if it's 20 below, just to keep the speed up, these are guys that won't wear sleeves, everything, the uniform's as tight as possible, so there's nothing loose, nothing to get in the way. So when you're a speed guy, if you got a brace on your leg, pretty sure you're thinking about that just about all the time. So Max can tell the media he's not thinking about it, but I think it is something that's not a concern, but it's a thing. It's something literally weighing on him. And like he said, he'd prefer to be without it, but I think he still could be effective. I don't know how effective he's going to be this year. You know, the question with Hairston is when you're a guy who missed all of training camp as a rookie, just about all of training camp, you get so far behind that it's hard to catch back up. We saw that with Cole Bishop last year. Even you think about Cole Bishop last year, missed a big chunk of camp, never really played much during the season. And this year, the Bills clearly wanted him to be a starter, and he had every single rep he was healthy for in training camp. I mean, that guy never came off the field in August with the first teams, not once. So if you want an example of how far behind Max Hairston is right now, the guy who kind of went through what he went through last year needed to take every rep this year so the Bills would be satisfied he'd be ready to start for season number 2. Which is why I continue to really be skeptical of how much Hairston can help this year. I think he's going to get a chance, mainly because the guys who've been in there so far just haven't been good enough or haven't been healthy enough. You know, if Dorian Strong was healthy, you know, I wonder how much Max Hairston was going to play this year, because Strong seemed to be on a path to being able to have a competent ability to hold that number 2 job down. I think we've all seen that Trey White, although like he's not totally ineffective, he's not the guy you want out there as a starter. Just not that guy anymore. I think the league kind of told you that last year when he didn't last the whole season with the Rams. He went to Baltimore. Baltimore didn't want to hold on to him. I know they've got a ridiculously talented secondary, so there's extra reason there to move on from Trey White. But I think the league told you last year that Trey White is not a guy you can count on to be a regular starter. So the Bills need to find somebody else, which is why they drafted 2 corners, and both of them have looked good at different times. The problem is both of them have been hurt now for extended periods. So all that cycling back to, what's Max Hairston going to do? I think he's going to get a shot. And behind or not, I think the difference between safety and corner is that at safety, there's a lot more, especially in this McDermott defense, a lot more communication needed. When you're the safety, you got to be talking to the linebackers, the corners, you're directing traffic a little bit. Doesn't matter which safety you are. Both guys have that responsibility. When you're the corner, you can kind of just be responsible or worry about your half of the field. I don't need to know what teams who play different coverages on both sides. If you're the safety, you got to know both. If you're the corner, I just got to know my half. So I think there's less of a hill for Hairston to climb. And then there's a part of this too where as fast as he is, even if he's wrong, he can make up something for a lot easier than a lot of other guys will, just because he can cover more ground if he's out of position. So there's reason to be hopeful for Hairston, more so than Bishop. But, you also have to have the confidence of coaches that you're going to do the right thing. Because the other part of it, and this goes for safety too, there are too many times, if those guys, like if your defensive tackle's wrong, it's a 5-yard run. If your linebacker is wrong, you might get hit on a little 15-yard play action pass. If your corner or your safety is wrong, it's a touchdown. So the Bills got to feel confident enough in Hairston to know the defense that they can feel like they're not throwing a guy out there who's just going to be a mistake that's going to go for 6 every other possession. But if Hairston can clear that bar, the physical ability combined with what the Bills currently have going at corner, I think will give him an opportunity to make an impact. So we'll see. The Bills are I think Hairston's probably a couple weeks away from playing. Look at the Bills' schedule. Obviously, they got Carolina this week. He's not playing this week. Next week is the Kansas City game. And the way that offense is humming, I would be pretty surprised if the Bills would roll Hairston out for game 1 against them. At Miami after that might be the time. I mean, obviously, he's got a 3-week window here. So he's got to be active either for, how to work. I think he could probably be inactive through Panthers, Chiefs, Dolphins, and then would have to be back for the Tampa game at the latest, because if the Bills don't activate him after the 21-day window's over, he's out for the season. They don't want that. They need bodies at corner. So it's just a matter of when you want to activate him for. I think the Dolphins game in 2 weeks would probably make the most sense. Good test too. I mean, a couple speed receivers, or Jalen Waddle, I should say, as a speed test, probably be a good fit for Max Hairston for game one. But I think we will see him get an opportunity soon. I don't think there's a high probability that Max Hairston is changing things in the secondary, to the point where I still think corner 2 is a high priority item for the Bills and Brandon Beane when it comes to the trade deadline. All right, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we will talk a little bit about the Panthers and the situation they're in, especially at quarterback. Who will the Bills see this weekend, and will it matter? And then we will get into the gambling scandal that broke today with NBA coaches and players. What does it mean for the person at home who's the online gambler right now? Is this a watershed type event for the future of online gambling in this country? Talk about both those subjects and more when we come back. You are watching Rock One. This is the Endgame. I'm Thad Brown. We'll see you after. We also are on after every single game day. The game day time depends on when the game day time is, but most of the time you can catch that show at the very least Monday morning at 9:30 following every single Bills game. Like I said, the Bills injury report came out, and exactly the same as yesterday. No changes at all. Taylor Rapp, Daquan Jones, Josh Palmer did not practice. Terrell Bernard, Dalton Kincaid, Matt Milano, Curtis Samuel, all limited. Max Hairston limited as well. So I think there's an excellent chance that Taylor Rapp does not play on Sunday, and that might mean we get a start, believe it or not, from Jordan Poyer. The Bills only have 2 safeties on the active roster right now, Rapp and Cole Bishop, and Poyer is the only guy listed as a safety on the practice squad. So you don't have to do much difficult math to get to a point where Jordan Poyer is going to be a starting safety for the Bills in the year of our Lord 2025. Now, Cam Lewis could do it. He's played a number of positions. He's done a lot of things. Pretty talented guy. So maybe the Bills go that route or split it up a little bit. I didn't think Poyer was bad at all in his stint against Atlanta. The defense certainly as a whole was better during the time he was in there. I don't know how related that was, but I thought Poyer was fine. And to be honest, this is probably not a bad matchup if the Bills have to go Jordan Poyer, because this is not a team that you expect to be attacking safeties down the field through the air. The one caveat to that I will drop in is that the Carolina receivers are pretty ridiculously big. I mean, Tet McMillan is 6'5", Xavier Legette is 6'3", 225, Jalen Coker is 6'3". So from that point of view, may not be the best game for a Jordan Poyer appearance, but the Bills might not have much of a choice if Taylor Rapp's not going to play. And when you don't practice on Wednesday and Thursday, I would think the probability of not playing is pretty high. We'll see if something changes on Friday, just because of the number situation. And, I don't think the Bills were ever intending to use Jordan Poyer as a starter. I think based on those two things, you might see Rapp try and tough it out if he's not quite 100%. But I think the likely scenario is that Jordan Poyer, right now, the thing I'm betting on is that Jordan Poyer is going to be on the field Sunday against the Panthers as a starter, which is just bananas to think about. When the Bills signed him, we all thought he'd be, Micah Hyde 2.0, extra coach in the field. And he was okay-ish for the Dolphins last year. Certainly not what Jordan Poyer was years ago when he was really good with the Bills. But I think Jordan Poyer and Trey White might be at the same level in their career in terms of you can put them on the field, but they're probably not helping you a ton. I think it does, at least Jordan Poyer with the experience, and like I said before the break, the safety position being more of a traffic cop thing, I think Poyer will help there because he can certainly do that part of it, you would think, at a pretty high level. So the mental part should still be there with Jordan Poyer, even if the physical is not. The thing you worry about, and the thing we talked about him with 2 years ago when he was the starter was that was the year where I think it was Breece Hall and maybe Jalen Warren for the Steelers. There were 2 or 3 running backs who busted off long runs, and Poyer, being the safety, literally the guy that is supposed to, provide safety against long running touchdowns, was missing tackle after tackle, and even talked about it. So when you're facing a run team like this Carolina one, where I don't think Chuba Hubbard or Rico Dowdle are guys you would think about as 70-yard touchdown threats, but they've been running the heck out of the ball the last 3 weeks. So Jordan Poyer at safety, especially the way the Bills' run defense is, we think, is probably going to get tested if he's a starter over and over. And that was a weakness in his game the last time he played. Speaking of the Panthers real quick, we don't officially know who the quarterback is going to be, but I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be Andy Dalton. He was taking the first team reps today. Bryce Young was working on the side. The offensive coordinator even talked about the fact that Dalton is taking the first team reps. So they're not, the Panthers at least, not overly hiding whether it's going to be Andy Dalton or Bryce Young. I don't know if it matters much which quarterback it is from the Bills' point of view. I think Dalton has a higher floor in terms of the mental acuity. You think about this. The last 3 quarterbacks the Bills faced before the bye, it was Spencer Rattler, Michael Penix, and Drake May, not necessarily in that order. They had 32 starts of experience before they faced the Bills. Andy Dalton has 172. So while those 3 guys were all guys the Bills could theoretically go out there and trick and, run a bunch of coverages and confuse and perhaps force into turnovers, I don't think the Bills were really good at it, to be honest. With those 3 guys, they didn't really seem to have much of an impact. But that whole part of the Bills' defensive game plan, you would think is out the window against Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton has seen it all. He's done it all. He is not going to be tricked. He's not going to be worried. He's not going to be flustered. He should be able to handle whatever the Bills, throw out this weekend defensively. The difference is that Bryce Young actually has been a pretty good scrambler this year. Not scrambling for yards like Lamar Jackson would, but scrambling to buy time. His legs have been pretty effective. And to make plays out of structure and out of the pocket, he's not Josh Allen, but he's done okay. And you're not going to get that with Andy Dalton. So, like I said, I think the floor is higher with Dalton. The avoidance of mistakes, you would think, should be higher. And this offensive line for Carolina is pretty solid. They should be able to protect him. I think their pass protection numbers are actually pretty well above average. So I would actually, let me see if I have it here. Did they make my notes with their pass protection? Only the good stuff gets into the notes. No, 23rd in pressure rate allowed. I take that back. Their offensive line is not very good. So the Bills, although they might not be able to trick Andy Dalton, they should be able to get to him. And when they do, he's not going to go anywhere. So I think that'll be, an opportunity for the Bills to have some success against this Panthers offense, because the thing Carolina wants to do is run the ball. If you can get them out of that, you probably have them. Now, Carolina's unbeaten at home this year. Give them credit there. They beat the Falcons at home. Now, I want to talk about this game for a second. People bring up this Carolina-Atlanta game all week long for a number of reasons. Whether it's to kind of diminish who the Falcons are or to pump up the potential test the Bills are going to face this week as, wow, Carolina won 30-0 over Atlanta. They must be good. That game was as fluky as it gets when you watch it. Maybe not as fluky. I mean, there was a game this year where, Tennessee came back down 21-6 in the fourth quarter with all kinds of ridiculous fumbles. That game was fluky. The Panthers-Falcons game, however, number of things happened. Number one, there were multiple passes where it was like 3rd and 7 and Michael Penix was a yard off, or a receiver just barely couldn't make a catch. And they were all like big downs, punt forcing mistakes. That's number one. Number two, Falcons missed 2 field goals in the first half. Not that 6 points was going to make a difference when you lose 30-0, but when it's 10-0, if that was actually 10-6, the game does feel a whole lot different, especially with a young offense and a young quarterback like Penix and Bijan and all those guys. The third thing is that once they kind of got into that hole, Penix threw a ridiculous pick 6, like on his own 10-yard line. One of those plays that guy in start number 7 would be absolutely expected to make, and that made it from 10-0 to 17-0. And then from there, Carolina just kind of, pressed in the second half. They were able to run the ball. They were able to do everything they're comfortable in. The Atlanta went for a couple fourth downs, didn't convert. So they might not have gotten shut out if they were in a different score situation. But it was, the first half was just a compilation of weird stuff that all went against Atlanta that built that 30-0 win. It doesn't mean Carolina didn't deserve to win the game. But I think when you look at that game and you think, wow, 30-0, maybe the Panthers are for real. I don't take much from that game, a lot from that game that tells me Carolina is this great 4-3 team. And then if you look at their other wins, it's the Jets on the road, it's Miami at home, and it's Dallas at home. And hey, Dallas is a solid win. I mean, Dallas, I think, is 3-1. So give them credit there. Caught a break when the Cowboys fumbled a snap on their own 8 and cost them points. So Carolina's got some teeth to them. And again, I think what they want to do is run the ball primarily. So all that said, I don't think it matters much who the quarterback is. Because, yeah, you might get a little more athletic guy in Bryce Young, but you probably can do more things to him mentally. Whereas Andy Dalton is not going to go anywhere outside of the pocket, but you're not tricking him at all. So I really think it's pretty much the same both ways. Let's see if the line has moved at all. Bills were 7.5 early. It's still 7.5. So, Vegas is not, budging an iota in terms of what quarterback the Panthers are going to roll out there. And I think it's appropriate. I don't think this is a game or a team where if you go from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton, you're changing the equation much for what's happening with Bills Panthers on Sunday. All right. Big news today in sports. 2 NBA players, right? One current player, one former player who's now a coach. Both were arrested in what essentially were gambling-related scandals. Now, they both were arrested today, but really it seems like the 2 cases are totally separate. So if you haven't seen it, here's what happened. Chauncey Billups, who's currently the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, played for years in Detroit, won a championship, I think multiple championships there. He was arrested. And then Terry Rozier, who's a current player, he's on the back end of his career, playing for the Heat, or most recently playing for the Heat, he was arrested too. So the Chauncey Billups part I'll take first, because what happened with him, I think, is less impactful, relatable to anybody who's sitting here listening, or me for that matter. So Billups apparently was a part of a mafia-created fraudulent poker game. The idea is you find a fish, find a victim, whatever you want to call it. You invite them to play the game, and you sit them down with celebrities. The nickname or the criminal term for that is face cards, whatever. You sit them down with celebrities. They think it's a legit game. It's awesome. I'm playing big money with, wow, it's Chauncey Billups. Look at that. I know who that guy is. He was on my NBA fantasy team. And then what happens is other, assumably members of the mafia, since it was organized crime related, are sitting at the table with you, but they all have cameras and all kinds of shuffling tricks, basically like all the bad parts of Ocean 11, all the parts that we think are hilarious, except when they're happening to us. That's what the mafia is doing to extort money from these people. And then it's the mafia. So, if these people who show up don't want to pay, well, then they find other ways to persuade money to come out of the pockets of these victims. But that is something that if you're me or you figure never in our lifetime are we going to come within a sniff of being in a situation like that. The Terry Rozier part is a little more relatable, because what Rozier apparently was doing was providing inside information for professional gamblers to then exploit through online gambling. So, different than what Billups was doing. There apparently was a game in March when Rozier played for the Hornets. Again, he played for the Hornets 2 years ago, most recently with the Heat. There's a game in March of 2023 when he played for the Hornets where within an hour before game time, there were a number of suspicious bets that came in on Terry Rozier unders, under points, under rebounds, under assists. And of all the things you can fix, that would be the easiest thing to do. Maybe in all of sports, to be honest. You just tell an NBA player, hey, this game, don't go for that rebound. Don't make the extra pass. Make sure you miss that layup. Those are all, that is probably, when it comes to using a player to create fraudulent profits, that's the game you can play. So while Chauncey Billups is in this mafia-related card game, Terry Rozier is doing something or a part of something that millions of Americans are involved in. And I think one of the first reactions is, for people who were against online gambling, this was kind of what they thought the end game would be. That if you make it more and more legal, you're going to provide more and more opportunities for fraud. And no matter your opinion on online gambling, that's just a fact. The more opportunities that are out there for people to bet on sports, then the more chances there's going to be that people involved or assets close to or around the game take advantage of whatever loopholes or, whatever cheating opportunities they have to try and extort or fraudulently make money. I mean, that's just going to happen. So I don't know I don't think that side is the right side to be on, though. And look, to be totally clear about this, I'm absolutely someone who online gambles just about regularly, just about every day. I enjoy it. I'm pretty successful at it. So I'm going to come at this probably from a little bit of a biased perspective. But I do understand, there is an addictive part of gambling that is certainly a danger when it comes to making this as readily available as it is now. That's a whole different discussion. An absolutely valid one, but different from this. The question with this is online gambling safe enough and controlled enough, I think is the better term, to make it reasonable to be in, a regular society? And there's clearly a good argument not for against it, and it's happening right here in front of us. This is not the only NBA player who's involved in this type of scandal. There's another, I forget the player's name, but there's another investigation going on to something similar. So I'm not going to look at this and say that online gambling is the devil and needs to stop, even if I know there's a number of people out there who would think that. I do think that it is a reminder, though, that there needs to be significant controls, and there needs to be probably more effort being made between leagues and the online gambling books to make an effort to make sure these things aren't happening. Now, to the bookmakers' credit, it seems like the genesis of this investigation was, again, that game that Terry Rozier played in a couple Marches ago, 3 Marches ago, to where the bets came in late and looked suspicious. And apparently the books that day, stopped betting, took the lines down. And that eventually led to Rozier being investigated today. Adam Silver talked today in relation to this. First of all, obviously, Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups are out of basketball indefinitely. I would imagine you'll never see them again, barring this investigation being totally incorrect. But the other thing that Silver talked about was a need to work with the online books to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen again. And he has, made that effort already. He talked about how there needs to be more of an effort to limit the two-way lines. In other words, you can have a betting line on a guy to maybe go. A lot of the books will do this. You can bet the over, but not the under. And yeah, you can fix the over. There are ways to certainly do it, but it's harder, like I said, than it is to fix the under. So that's a part of what the NBA wants to do to make sure this doesn't happen again. But the effort is being made. This is not something that is being left unattended, that there isn't a reaction to it. And it doesn't excuse or dismiss the different risks that are out there when it comes to online gambling and the potential for fraud. But I think between the way the books reacted when the Rozier thing happened back in March of 23 and the things that Silver said today, and if you want to be a skeptic, I think it's very fair to look at Silver's comments and say, well, what else would he say? Of course he's going to say, "Oh, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again, everybody. We're going to go out there and we're going to get these guys and we're going to make sure that you can't cheat ever again." And it all sounds well and good, and you can be skeptical and say that this danger is still out there, the risk is still out there, and there's still going to be people out there that are going to try and cheat the books. And I get that. And that the easy way to fix this would just be to go back to what things were like 5 years ago, pre-COVID, when online gambling was not anywhere near as legal or as accessible as it is now. And while, yeah, that would probably be a better way, you would have less fraud that way. There are so many gambling books around the world that you're not getting rid of it altogether. There were point shaving scandals before we even owned phones, let alone had online gambling on our phone. So while this is, I think, a reminder that the threat is always there, that the worry is always there, and that the need for vigilance by leagues and by bookmakers needs to be continual and probably a little more active than it's always been. I think if you have a complaint about online gambling and the way it's managed, it's that to me, the FanDuels and DraftKings and Caesars and all those books of the world, they certainly aren't making an effort to number one, control people's gambling addiction. But number two, and I get they're a business, the only thing that seems to matter on their end is just, raking in that cash. And yeah, this is America and it's capitalism. I get all that. But I've always felt that the books, in many ways, could be significantly more responsible for the ancillary impact of their being legalized than they are. And this would probably be a part of it. Now, in this case, they would be losing money because if players are taking a dive, essentially, to help their friends make money, then yeah, this is costing the books money. And you would think they would want to be as involved as possible to curtail that. But in general, my just being involved in this and kind of following the chatter on social media and, people who are smarter at it than I am, the reaction I've gotten is that the general opinion of the books is laissez-faire, that as long as we keep making the billions of dollars, we're not going to worry about what happens to society around us. And I think the books could be in more with the addiction of an individual person than it is with this kind of thing. The books could be more responsible. But this situation too, I would think that there is a responsibility on the side of the bookmakers to be more aware of this kind of cheating happen. Because when it's Terry Rozier helping guys making tens of thousands off NBA games, that's just as illegal as some kid at Michigan State South trying to shave a couple points for $500 for their friends. And they're both illegal. But I think the books are going to care a little more about one than the other. Either way, look, yeah, is this a cautionary tale for online gambling? I think so. Is this going to be the end of the line for online gambling? I don't think so at all. I mean, the money is too big. The involvement's too big at this point. Now, if we get one of these every 3 months now, then, get back to me in a year and we'll have a different conversation. But for now, online gambling is a giant behemoth of a moneymaker for a lot of different people, including a lot of local governments. And again, there are millions who are involved. And while I am one who enjoys it and does it all the time, if at some point society as a large said, you know what, this is bad for us, I'd be like, okay. But I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. This is something that's been wildly successful in a number of different ways. And yeah, we had a scandal today. And there have been scandals prior to online gambling being legal. There will be more scandals after this. At this point, the general speed with which these scandals have erupted, I think so far is negligible. It's not something that's going to change where we're at as a society, or I think what most governments do when it comes to addressing online gambling. All right, we are done for today. Back again on Monday. We will recap Bills and Panthers, and for all you Bills fans out there, that better be a win. That better be a W. There are reasonable ways to lose that game. I don't think Carolina's terrible. I don't think they're a 4-3 team, but they're not Jets or Dolphins bad either. So I could see it being a loss, but man, 3-game losing streak, something that's never happened with Josh Allen, at least not in the regular season. After losing to two teams in the NFC South, that would be a panic button moment. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the World Series too. Hope Ernie Clement does well. And we will see you again on Monday. Thanks for watching the Endgame. I'm Thad Brown. This is Rochester First, but all the kids, all the cool ones you know, they call it Rock One. Have a great weekend.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.